So please welcome Valeriia Gontareva.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm very happy to see all of you here. As far as I understand, today our language is English. That's why we will start in English. And I'm third time in my life participate in this conference, and I can tell you that I'm really happy to confirm my participation here, because the CFA community it's a real professionals, and frankly speaking, it will be immediately announcement from the National Bank. All of you are welcome right now to participate in for some positions, for some content in positions within the National Bank, because right now we do some really huge restructuring and reforming of National Bank, and I think that such professionals like CFA specialists welcome always to our organization. And let's start with some key messages which I'd like to bring to this audience. First of all, it's absolutely incredible year we faced before. No one of us could even imagine 1 year ago that something like this happened with our country. And you know, we can tell, of course, that Ukraine somehow used to have some revolution, because we still remember the revolution of 2004, our Orange Revolution, but this time, you see, it was quite different. And finally, what's happened, you know, that first of all, it was absolutely incredible annexion of Crimea. Nobody expected, not even in Ukraine, but we could not even imagine that our neighbor Russia, which we consider like a really friendly neighbor, could do something like this. And of course, this hot war in Donetsk and Lugansk, again, nobody could even imagine that something like that could happen with us. And you know that it could be quite difficult for each country in the world to face such disasters. But in the same time, you know that Ukraine was not quite prepared for all of that. Because even if we compare our figures of GDP of 2008 and beginning of 2014, we can observe that we still didn't reach, in the beginning of this year, we still didn't reach the level of our GDP of 2008. It means that it was a real more than 6-year recession, even without all these disasters. I can tell you that the previous management of National Bank spent about $22 billion to support stable hryvnia exchange rate. They even spent only during these first months of this year, in January and February, they even spent $4 billion for this so-called stable exchange rate. And finally, even when they spent $22 billion for this so-called stabilization, our GDP was still in recession, and that's why it was absolutely not helpful for our economies. More to that, it was created tons of disbalances in our economy. And even our exchange rate, you know what's happened further with all this exchange rate adjustment, and right now we will discuss with you also what's going on and what is the expectations of the National Bank about that. And you know that absolutely incredible situation we got, but finally I think we managed this situation. We find some very good partners. You know that right now Ukraine has a special program supported by IMF, by World Bank, by other international organizations. And unfortunately right now I can tell you that it's only one economic program. I think we should have more comprehensive program and program of our reform and our economic program. But right now we have this program, and I think that we quite in good cooperation with all our international supporters go ahead with all this program. And all these disbalances which Ukraine got and collected during last, believe me, maybe even 20 years. Because sometimes when I observe, for example, even problem of Naftogaz, we can recognize that it's not a problem of which happened yesterday. It's a problem of collected disbalances during the long time. Absolutely the same situation in the banking sector. And all these disbalances happened not yesterday. It's a legacy of even when we observe the banking system, we see that it's a legacy of last 10 years. And especially it's a legacy of after crisis of 2008 time. Stable exchange rate, it's only one anchor of our economy, which is absolutely wrong message, which I really showed you before, with still recession from 2008 and stable exchange rate. That's why we're really committed for a flexible exchange rate. Also, we committed to implement inflation targeting. Unfortunately, in our plans, inflation targeting implementation, we consider even to start all this process even this year. Unfortunately, right now we still have, because of all this wartime economy, it's very difficult for implementation of inflation targeting. That's why we moved this inflation target and agreed with IMF that it will be, we move it in next implementation of inflation targeting, we will move in next 12 months. But we're still committed to inflation targeting. We also need to have some prerequisites to introduce this policy. If you see what's right now going on in Russia, you can observe that they already implemented inflation targeting in their economy. But unfortunately, any panic, even in a country with $500 billion of reserves, didn't save their currency from huge devaluation. And that's why it's clear that even inflation targeting is not a remedy for everything, you know. For all these difficult times, of course, it's not a remedy. But in the same time, I truly believe that flexible rate and inflation targeting is a real good way for us to help our economy to grow further. And unfortunately, when I tell you to help our economy to grow further, it looks like right now like a joke, because this year GDP will be minus, according to our forecast, will be minus 7.5%, and for next year our forecast is minus 4.3%. It means that what we are doing right now, how we clean up our banking sector, what we are doing for stabilization of our macro environment, what we are doing like restructuring, internal restructuring of the national bank, what we are doing here, it's only like a base and preparation for our GDP growth. And of course, I can tell you that National Bank not only sitting and waiting, National Bank providing all these reforms right now. If you see, for example, even 26 banks we already sent to our DGF, Deposit Guarantee Fund. because of insolvency and because of some of them, 7 of them were pure institutions for money laundering. We were absolutely shocked when we recognized what kind of money laundering and what the volume of this money laundering could happen in our country when our country signed agreement with all these FATF and FATCA even and disappeared from this blacklist even 10 years ago. That's why, and believe me, we will not stop our fighting with all of that. More to that, when we sent all these banks to the GIA fund and recognize what kind of schemes they use, we were even surprised that some European countries were declare their procedures and their commitment to fight with money laundering, even provided services for these particular banks. And I think that during my Washington visit, when I met some governors of these particular countries, we discussed with them how it could even happen, because right now I think it's not only Ukrainian problem, yes, it's really a world problem, and it still exists, unfortunately, in the world. After what we finished already a stress test of 35 biggest Ukrainian banks. 35 biggest Ukrainian banks represent about 80% of Ukrainian banking systems. That's why it's quite a sizable amount of banks and quite representative. And this stress test, it was initially 15 biggest banks, and after it was 20 other banks. That's why it's 35 banks. Right now they require about, the total requirement of recapitalization, it's 66 billion hryvnias. And I can tell you that biggest part of this stress test was still not like a problem of Lugansk and Donetsk. It was an asset quality review of to the end of the 2013, and plus some problems in Crimea, and but not Lugansk and Donetsk, who was only partially there. And even when you see these 66 billion hryvnias, it means that legacy, because it was the asset quality review of last year, it means it's a legacy of last 7 years. It's not a problem which Ukraine faced today. But of course, right now, capital requirement even could be higher because of Donbass and Donetsk. But in the same time, a few days ago, we called a meeting with Big Four international auditors. We even invited not only Big Four, but also invited some other international auditors and evaluators, and discussed with them also this problem of Donbass, Lugansk and Donetsk. Because, you know, according to international principles, we have to recognize all losses immediately, but at the same time, because of these uncertainties and nobody knows what will happen in this region, we discuss what kind of methodology we will implement right now for this particular case. And that's why a problem with Ukrainian banking system exists, but in the same time we have a very good, strong recapitalization commitment for recapitalization from all banks, because state banks will be recapitalized by the state. And all of that already envisaged in the program, IMF program. We have a special line in our program which provide us all this information about this possible financing of our bank. And also we have a special program with World Bank. It's a program, it's a financial stability program, and we recently got $500 million of US dollar for this DPL1 program, which supported our DGF fund. It's very important because when you clean up your banking system, it means the capitalization from one hand, but in the same time, when shareholders not deliver their promises, they not capitalize the bank in a proper way, in a proper time, the next step for them, it will be liquidation or case of very important status of these banks, how we call it, systemic bank, it will be, of course, nationalization. That's why, you know, that all these both aspects, recapitalization of banks and recapitalization of our DGF, is crucial. And for both of these projects, we have a support from IMF and from World Bank. It's about recapitalization of banking sector. Of course, recapitalization of banking sector, it's only one first step how to clean up your banking system. Because the main idea of banking system is start a real lending. And I truly believe that to start all this real lending and real lending to economy, it's an idea of protection of rights of creditors. And that's why our main also responsibility right now is a preparation of a legislation for all these creditor rights, and all this legislation and draft of this law will be submitted to our new parliament very soon. And you know that when we discuss that National Bank will be, in our country, again, it's written even in our constitution that National Bank responsible for stability of exchange rate. But you know that stability of exchange rate, it's not only stability of particular exchange rate, US dollar against hryvnia. It's stability of our, it's low inflation, it's stability of our prices. It's stability and low interest rate for our economy. And that's why we will have, when we implement inflation targeting, we will have, frankly speaking, absolutely different anchor for our stability. In the same time, I'd like to remind you that National Bank absolutely not an exporter, importer, customs or fiscal authorities. And National Bank cannot do all of that alone, you know. The stability of our local currency, of our hryvnia, it's joint responsibilities of all powers, government and National Bank. It's a joint responsibility. Because you cannot create themselves, National Bank cannot create themselves balance of payment of this country. What National Bank can do, National Bank can only support banking sector through different monetary mechanism. In case of emergency, what we did even in September of this year, National Bank could introduce different administrative measures. And National Bank could support markets through intervention, but of course, again, limited intervention. Only during the panic period, what again we did before. That's why National Bank right now to try to introduce right and absolutely clear procedures and principles what should be done within the National Bank. And also I'd like to mention a few words about internal reform of National Bank. Recently we presented our to the Council, National Bank Council, not even recently, in August of this year, our new budget for next year. And believe me, it was absolutely incredible for everybody to see that National Bank cut their expenditure more than 2 times, from 11 billion hryvnias to 5 billion hryvnias. Means that we saved 6 billion hryvnias for our budget and for our country. And of course, how we could achieve such a result, of course, because we planned some drastic changes within the National Bank. And the main idea, all these drastic changes, it's not to simply cut 50% of your personnel, because 50% of your personnel, it's not a big deal, because compared to with the other national banks, central banks in the world, you can easily recognize that staffing of the national bank was more than 3 or 4 even times bigger than in other central banks on this planet. But the main idea in the 21st century, when you have absolutely other means of communications and possibility of this communication, you should create absolutely new procedures and absolutely new level of these communications and procedures. And for example, even when I joined National Bank, we recognized that Ukraine still have 25, for example, regional offices. All these regional offices, it's like a small kingdom in each particular territory. They have, sometimes they have more than 100 IT specialists, when this IT specialist, you know, support only like system administrator, maybe they need 1 or 2. And after we recognize that in these territories, for example, no one bank is really registered, and all other electronic transfers in 21st century happened, frankly speaking, in absolutely other place in our center of payments within the national bank. That's why we recognize that it's not even necessarily to have all these 25 regional offices. I only count you some few examples of how it works. And also, when all people ask me about corruption, and also when they complain that it's very difficult to stop corruption, I can tell you, if, for example, what kind of challenges personally I met in this particular job. And corruption, of course, it's one of that, because unfortunately, institution which I manage right now was a quite corrupted organization. Maybe people know about that. But believe me, corruption, it's like vertically integrated business. If there is no any order from higher places, means no any order from higher, and it's a top-down approach. Means that if no real order from this side, no order from the side, for example, of the governor of National Bank, no order from the side of deputy governor, no order from the president, means that absolutely no orders from no one. It's very easy to stop this corruption. Absolutely no big deal. Because all biggest decision within the National Bank, it's a decision of management board of the National Bank. And it's immediately, you can recognize, if you have some professional skills, you can easily recognize when something wrong going on. And of course, you cannot stop corruption maybe in all particular lower places. For lower places corruption, you should introduce the right procedures. But when right now I observe the right procedure of our tender for how to purchase goods for state organization, I can tell you that it's exactly the place of corruption. Even recently, when we decided to cut 50% of our personnel, I recognize that somehow happens that National Bank bought 1,000 new computers when we have maybe not need even 5 new computers because of cut of personnel. That's why, believe me, it's difficult, but it's doable. And in lower places, of course, you should organize the right procedures and monitoring of all these procedures. In the higher places, I think it's absolutely easy and no any complaints about how to stop all this corruption. And I think it's more than 10 minutes already. That's why I will be the panelist today as well as my colleagues. That's why all your questions will be there, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valeriia, for your interesting and data-driven speech. So now I'd like to refer to the president of the CFA Ukraine, Yevhen, who said that we used to have problems with inviting representatives of the government to speak at the forum, which is 100% true. So now the big question for the first panel is whether the government became more transparent after the revolution, or whether we managed to get friends who would show up in the government. And so the last year, the headline of the forum was a crucial moment of choice. Needless to say, how difficult was this decision. We all remember a revolution in winter, the escape of the ex-president of Ukraine, and the military invasion by the closest neighbor of Ukraine, Russian Federation. And now the choice has been made. The EU association agreement has been signed and validated simultaneously by Ukrainian and EU governments. But what does it actually mean to sign this association agreement? Can we consider that as the complete action plan? Or when can we expect a 50 places jump in the doing business regime? So our first panel is supposed to give answers on these questions. And let me introduce well-known Ukrainian journalist, media expert, TV and radio anchor Andriy Kulikov, who will be a moderator of the panel and who will introduce the speakers just in a second. And
Yes.
before we start, I'd like to address two messages. That after the first panel, we'll have a coffee break, approximately 30 minutes, and also I see many of you use computers, so if you need Wi-Fi, the password is written on the back side of the page.
Right now we try to clean up our banking system, because you know that National Bank responsible for macro stability and National Bank responsible for banking sector, for stability of banking sector. And unfortunately right now, if you observe what we are doing, you can tell that no macro stability and no stability of banking sector. And that's why I'd like to express, of course, and explain you what we are doing, and when I hope we will see this stability. You know that it's absolutely impossible to clean up all these disbalances and legacy in one day. That's why we have a special program. For example, right now we have a program of recapitalization and of cleanup of our Ukrainian banking system. It's absolutely quite a challenging job, and I think that during our panel, because I will be a panel, participate in a panel discussion, we will discuss all of that in more detail. And about macro stability, it's absolutely incredible right now to create this macro stability again in one day. And all this environment, this hot war, deterioration of our GDP, even physical destruction of our industry, because all this Donbas region, you know that it's our industrial region, and nobody right now has a doubt what kind of GDP, what kind of export proceeds this region brought to Ukraine before, because you remember the discussions that this region is not so successful. We know that it's a region of our industry, and right now in this isolated territory, about 15% of our industrial output and 10% of our GDP. That's why all these absolutely incredible challenges created some turmoil in the local market. And because Ukraine was not quite immune, we have a very limited ammunition before we face such a difficult circumstances. You know that devaluation reached about 100%. Right now, it's absolutely not fundamental figures, but still all these last movement of exchange rate, of course, moved by panic of business, by panic of our population. I can tell you that from balance of payments point of view, for example, our current account, even after devaluation of 50%, which happened this year in the beginning, it was in July, devaluation was about 50%, and our current account was in equilibrium at that time. And of course, all this hot war created more fears. More to that, they created not only fears among business and populations, they also physically destroyed our industry. And that's why we faced all these problems, and we're still in a position when right now, together with all banks and market participants, we try to find some new equilibrium rate. And as far as we see right now, it's more or less there. And we still believe that even new equilibrium rate, it doesn't mean that it's a real fundamental rate which we can rely on. It's again, we still believe that when panic will be more or less disappear, of course, or some confidence, I can tell you, confidence appear in the market, we can see some better development even in this area.